'58 Bassman on 3 Tally, new pickup. I got that broadcaster bridge pickup in here from Murray Guitars and Murray Guitar Pickups, and this combination is making me very happy today. It's nice when one old thing into another old thing makes this old thing feel good. And so simple. And I can't get that sound from any of the modelers I've tried yet. Though I hope to... hey, Brian Meter. I meant to reply to your text. I saw it late last night, and I've got some... I'll call you. I'll call you Monday, Brian. Let's see here. It's been a while, been a month. I was out of town for 2 weeks, and I was sick for a week, and I'm recovering. I'm still recovering, and I went out and did some lawn work today because the grass had been growing for a month, and it was like this high. It no longer is, but I've got all that stuff up in my head, so I'll try not to sneeze all over everyone. I'm really pleased with this setup. Let me see if I can do something here. I should be able to. Let me turn the Wi-Fi on for just a second. And I should, at that point, all right, yeah, all right. So this is my phone. So this is what I see when we're live streaming. And I guess that's what I see when I'm live streaming. And so I've got the '58 Bassman there with the Royer on it. So it's the Royer R10 and then just guitars. And that's just going straight in. Let me change back to the regular camera. And I've got it set. So the Royer's on channel 2 and this 57's on channel 1. And I've got a side gate so that when anything is heard by that mic over what do you call it? Anything over negative 40 dB, this thing is dropped by 30 dB. So I can play that mic without having this mic blast because this is set for my vocal level. And Keith Williams, if you're watching this, that's the trick, to have an amp in the room with a mic on it and not have any interaction. All right, let me get to some of the questions that I've missed. I appreciate it. Yeah, I know I disconnected my iPhone. Thank you very much. All right, Gustavo Brazual. Thank you, Gustavo. He tried to build a Tweed Champ 5F1 from a kit and failed. How can I go about learning and practicing how to solder and all the basics? Well, it's a very good question. And put that Champ kit to the side. You will come back to that. But you need to get your soldering down well before you do anything involving high voltage or high current. Start by making guitar cables. Learn how to make a guitar cable really cleanly with really good solder joints. And it may be, a poor craftsman blames his tools on the one hand, but on the flip side of that is there are tools out there that are sold to people for soldering that I could not work with. I could not do what I do with a 20-watt iron from I almost said Radio Shack, from Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever your equivalent is wherever you live. you have to have the right iron. You can't have a 100-watt iron. You can't have a 20-watt iron. You need, if you're going to use a pencil iron, a 35 or 45, a 35 or 40-watt iron at the very is like the bare minimum, and you need to have the right tip. You want to have a relatively small chisel for most things. You don't want to have a really tiny tip. Neither do you want to have some giant spade thing that's going to overheat everything. I work with a variable temperature soldering station, which is, you can get the FX88 from Hacko for about $100, $120. That will revolutionize the way you work, and you have to have the correct solder. I prefer 80-20 leaded. There's, 60-40 leaded. There's also 67-32 or whatever it is, 63-37, and then there's various lead-free stuff. You need to have the gear, but you need to spend the time practicing. So make some guitar cables, build some pedal kits, and learn how to solder pots. Because you can practice on an old pot and until you can get every connection just beautiful the first time. And you really need to have, when you build an amp, and not to pat myself on the back, but look at that amp that I'm redoing for Keith, the GA40. Look at the afters. Everything in there needs to hold up to scrutiny. I can take this camera and put it in almost macro mode and put it on any one of my solder joints and show you guys and not be embarrassed. And it's not because it needs to be pretty, but when it's done right, it will also be pretty. So nice, shiny, clean joints without any excess. And you have to do that. If you have 1,000 connections, you have to have 1,000 good ones. And start from there. And then go back and look at your champ and see what you did wrong. Once you learn how to do it right, the wrong ways will stand out to you. Hey, Merrill. Is a master volume part of the mods I have in mind for the AB165, or is that not recommended? I like having a master volume in a basement. Merrill dropped off his AB165 basement head the other day. I've not had a chance to look at it yet because I'm still recovering from the yuck, but I do like installing a master volume in those. One of the things I was going to talk about on the stream is that this basement here, the volume's on 3, and if I turn it down below 3, the sound, the magic just goes away. It's not alive below 3, but above 3, it's really difficult to be in the room with it. So if this were my amp, I would install a master volume. But for the channel, for all these amps that I'm not going to be installing master volumes, but I need to test, like the Marshall Major that's here and such, is too loud to play for any sustained period of time in my room. And a 50-watt Marshall or a 50-watt Bassman, whether it's this Tweed one or yours, AB165, they're really loud to be in a small room with. And you saw the size of my room, Merrill. It's not that big. So I'm going to be getting probably 2 of the Sur load boxes with IRs. Actually, I'm going to get 1 load box with IR and 1 just straight load. That way, it'll give me 8 ohms and 4 ohm capability that'll cover most things. If I have an amp that's got a 2 ohm load like this 58 Bassman, it'll be safe to test with a 4 ohm mismatch, but I don't want to do a 2 ohm output long-term high volume into an 8 ohm load. So, or maybe I'll look into the Fryette, which has got some options, but I don't think 2 ohms is one of the options. Anyway, I'm looking at that down the road to have a good IR box, reactive load from Sur or Fryette, perhaps Fractal for the shop. So when I have the 50 watt and higher amps, and I really need to test it, as good as it sounds with that Royer, and that Royer really is like a cheat code for getting good guitar sounds. I just put the mic kind of in the vicinity of the speaker, and it sounds great. That's what you were just hearing. I didn't have to spend any time on it whatsoever. I've learned that about 4 fingers away from the, if here's the mic and here's the speaker, that's a happy place right there. Let me get to the next stuff. Jerry White. Hey, Jerry. With matched pair valves in an amp, if one goes bad but the other is fine, is there any way of now matching up the good valve with a spare or a new one? Any testers? Yeah, you can get a tube tester, but a good tube tester is very, very expensive. What I tell most clients is if you find a vendor that you trust, whether that's I would suggest the Tube Store or Tube Depot. And if you need two, order a matched quad, and that way, if one of them dies, you have three to choose from. They're all going to be in theory matched to each other. Now it's possible that as one tube begins to die, the other one finds a new current draw, and so it will no longer be matched to the originals from the set. They don't have any time spent. But in general, if you have four 6L6s that all say 32 on them from the current rating when they match them, and one of them dies, you can pop in one of the two spares, and it'll be balanced out right there. The other thing is, if you have a tube that you bought from a vendor and it has the numbers on it, you can call them and say, "Hey, I bought these JJs from you. Here's what it says. It says 29, and then it says 78,200." And they'll be able to sell you one that matches that. Now, they may choose not to. They may choose to say, "Well, we cannot guarantee that the tube that you have with those numbers will still match the tube that we have that draws those numbers on our tester." But it's a pretty safe bet. Ted C., no guest host or anything disappointing. Well, there's no guest host, but I can't promise that I myself won't be disappointing. And thank you, Jim Cox. Yeah, please, if you have a question, put question marks in front of it so it stands out, and please only ask once. I will get to them in sequence, I promise. Thank you, Jim, for putting that up there. Sorry about the sinus thing. If you were to build an app based on a vintage AC4, EF86 and EL84, no trim, what optimizations would I make to the circuit? Well, first of all, thank you for commenting, A. Joseph 86. I would not build an AC4 myself. The smallest one I would want would be the AC10. I don't think the push-pull EL84, the single-ended EL84 is a great option. I'm not a big fan of single-ended amps in general. I'd rather have push-pull. As far as optimizations to the circuit on an AC4, if you did want to have an AC4, I would pretty much build it the way that they built it. I might, definitely increase the screen grid resistor from 100 ohms up to 1K, and I might decrease some of the values of the cathode bypass caps, just to get a little tighter low end that the tiny output transformer and typically the small speaker will be happy with. But it's, if you must have an AC4, the JMI is a pretty nice version thereof. Hey Gustavo, is the AC30 C2X too much for mostly home use? I guess I answered my question already. I don't think it's too much. It's got a really usable master volume. It depends on if you need that level of volume for gigs, in which case it has that higher level. I think that the AC30 sounds better than the AC15 primarily because a 2x12 sounds better to me, subjectively, but a fairly commonly held subjective opinion. The 2x12 sounds better than 1x12, so 1x12 version of the AC30 will not sound as good as a 2x12 version of the AC30. You're not going to hear the 15 watts versus 30 watts that much. You will hear the 1x12 versus the 2x12 an awful lot. It just fills out the space in a room so much better when you want to fill out that space. When it has a larger frequency response and much more air is being moved, and as a result there is more volume. So for stage use or recording, that's fantastic. But in practice, using the master volume in it, you can set an AC30 to the same level in your house as you would an AC15. You would not notice any downside to that. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying not to belch on everyone. I've got all this drainage from being sick and then going out there and cutting the grass. And the grass smells very, very fresh and green, and I can't get it out of my sinuses. Hey, Chris McKinney. I'm feeling bad about changing out yellow Astrons from this 58 5G9 Tremolux. I would never feel bad. Astrons were garbage. Leo only used them a couple of years and he switched. I mean, he used them from like 57 to 60, and then he ditched them and went to the blue molded Ajax. And you can see the change start about 1960, and he never looked back. And he stuck with those blue Ajaxes through the rest of the time he was at Fender. And they never went back to the Astrons. They're just bad. They were cheap caps that didn't last. Ditch them. Move on. Make music. Mallory 150s are fine. They're not my favorite because the leads are a little bit flimsy. I like the Vishay MKT 1813s. You can get those at tubesandmore.com, antiqueelectronics.com, same site. They don't cost much more, or they cost the same as the Mallory 150s. Get the 630 volt version, and they're much nicer to work with, and they're really pretty. But you know, if you want to use Mallory's, go for it. Mallory's are fine. Hey, Albie, are digital reverbs replaceable in amps like a Marshall DSL-40CR? If you don't like the reverb, can it be replaced with another digital reverb? Not really, because the way that those reverbs are integrated with Amplifier usually uses proprietary connections, and the reverb's always kind of a grudging afterthought. Well, it needs to have reverb. We're just kind of sticking this little digital thing. Digital reverbs, as found in amps like the Marshalls, are usually okay, just okay. They're not fantastic. I wouldn't worry about it if I had the DSL-40CR and I'm like, okay, well, I wish I had better reverb. I would just turn off the reverb that's built into it. I use the effects loop and get like a Strymon or an HX Stomp. You know, there's so many, you know, just a Hall of Fame Mini for $70. Run that in the loop, and then you have a much, much better sounding digital reverb than anything that was built into the amp. And then if something new and fantastic comes out down the line 3 years from now, you just pop that in the loop. You can always have a world-class, state-of-the-art digital reverb as much as you want to spend on such things. Don't worry about updating the kind of little needs to have reverb. We'll stick this chipset in there reverb that most digital amp reverbs offer. They're not ever great. So see it for what it is. It's a pretty good amp. It has reverb, but it has an effects loop. You can use better reverb with it. But don't try to change it out in the amp. That's chasing your tail financially. Just a second. Sorry, I wasn't expecting all this. Hey, Federico. Could I explain why in the Sur Ombre the foot switch, tremolo foot switch has to be plugged in, otherwise a helicopter noise happens? That's not healthy. That's not something that the amp does normally. It sounds like you have a loose jack, like the foot switch jack needs to be tightened, or maybe you have a bad solder joint on the foot switch jack in your Ombre. But as I have a 62 Deluxe right there, and I've had the Ombres in, and none of them do what you're describing, you've got a problem with your Sur. But the problem with your Sur is going to be very minor and easily corrected. And if you were to contact Sur, they probably step you through it over the phone, or put you in touch with one of their local service centers and get that taken care of on their dime. But it may be just a matter of just tightening the jack a little bit. It might have just vibrated loose in time, and that jack is making ground to the chassis. And if that ground is not being made to the chassis correctly, you'll have problems like you're experiencing. Hey, Lefty Mike. Okay, you got a Badger 18. It's got the power scaling. Yeah. Well, what it does is let's see how far to get into this. The basic premise is that you want to convert wattage that you will not be using, or voltage that you will not be using, into heat. So rather than, you cannot just say, I'm going to make this voltage go away. The voltage has to go somewhere. with current, or it has to be turned into heat. And a MOSFET is a kind of transistor which is particularly good at that role of saying you have X voltage at this point, you're going to have Y voltage at another, and the difference between them is controlled by things outside that MOSFET that tell it what to do. And the basic premise of power scaling is that you are using a transistor gate to send X amount of current through that MOSFET so that the voltage drops by a desired amount. And you're using a potentiometer to trigger how much that transistor will turn on the actual large transistor. So you have a small transistor, which then triggers the large transistor, the MOSFET. And the MOSFETs used for such things are good about managing heat. And so basically, the amp always acts as if it's on 10. Say that the amp originally had a B plus of 400 volts, and it's operating with no master volume, and then you turn that down to 300 volts. Well, it's still operating the same. Everything is still behaving the same. You're just lowering the amount of voltage present, which is going to give you less wattage, and that goes all the way down, so you're down maybe 1 watt. And there are changes that you will hear as you turn it down because the preamp will have less headroom eventually. And there are ways to do it so that this stage is scaled and this stage is not. I have stopped installing such kits because I have found too many failures with the MOSFETs used for that purpose. Even when you use the best MOSFET available on the market at the time that you make that decision, with the best possible heat sink and thermal management, or even running 2 or more in parallel, I have found that the MOSFETs used for such purposes occasionally just fail, and there's no controlling it. And it makes you look bad as the installer, and it's a complicated thing to change out that a lot of techs aren't qualified to even understand what they're seeing. I have found that from a practical point of view, a good master volume is just as useful, sounds almost as good, is much less complicated, way fewer things to go wrong, and you don't have all the thermal issues. But the SERP implementation is as good as it's possible for that implementation to be. And basically, you can treat it like it's a master volume. You don't need to know all the scenes stuff. I have no thoughts on the Legendary Tones hot mod devices for JCM 800s. Let's see. Schweg 9140 asks, favorite reliable channel switching apps with clean high headroom, like the Cure or Johnny Marr, bluesy response over overdrive, Wilco, up to heavy gain. Such a thing is one that does all well. It's really tough because a lot of the stuff that out there that does that well tends to be aimed at a slightly different demographic than what you're describing. And so I think the closest things on the market to that might be the Sur PT100, but that's going to be going a little bit more martially than what you're talking about. If for the Cure and Johnny Marr stuff and bluesy responsive overdrive stuff, I really would suggest doing what those guys do. You know, look at Johnny Marr and look at the guys in Wilco. Get a super reverb and get some pedals, and then if you need heavier gain than you can get with that, maybe get a B rig for heavier stuff. But you know, Nels Cline could do everything you're talking about, including heavy gain stuff, just with some fuzzes and stuff, just from a super reverb and a pedal board. But if you really want to have channel switching amps, with the Sur PT100 might be the best choice on the market today for all those things. But I don't know if it's going to be your bluesy responsive overdrive or your heavy gain kind of thing. You play them. They're good amps. Play them and see if they float your boat. But I think you'd probably be just as happy with an AC30 or super reverb and a handful of pedals, because that's going to do all Cure, Wilco, Radiohead stuff. And I'm not familiar with Div or Ocean Size, but you can do a lot of heavy gain stuff with the right pedal. Hey, Alan from Stockholm, 77. Nice. Hey, Gast. Merry Old England was phenomenal. We had such a great time. I don't know how much people want to hear about it, but it was fantastic. And I feel, other than the fact that when I got back, I got this illness, which has laid me low for almost 2 weeks. I feel re energized mentally, and it was just wonderful. And I'll be glad to answer any specifics about it. The picture for today's thumbnail was from the Elgin Marbles, the Parthenon galleries at the British Museum. I just thought that was a nice looking shot with the angles. I've got about 1,800 photos of the trip that I will not subject you guys to, but maybe we'll do an ale report. Hey, John Newton the Fourth. I am super slammed. First of all, I don't check Facebook messages anymore. I put that on my Facebook Messenger page. I think the last thing on the Facebook business pages, don't contact me on here. I will never check this. Facebook is just being left up as a legacy where you can go back and look at old posts and stuff. But I don't do Facebook Messenger at all, and I have been slammed on emails. It's going to be a while before I can take anything else in. Please, I will reply to your email, but I've not had a chance to catch up to all of them yet. And if I don't, it seems like I'm complaining, but it's impossible to convey how many emails I get a day that have something to do with the Vox or AC30, or can you tell me how to fix this? What would this cost? What is this thing worth? There's so many things I can't possibly even begin to answer. If I did that, all I do 24 hours a day would be give out free information on emails, and therefore I would be starving. So it's a tough balance. I apologize. I appreciate everyone wanting me to work on their amps. I will reply as I can. Just 1 second, and then we'll get to Richard Clark's question. The 58 Bassman has just started to hum, and let me turn it off, and more on that in a moment. I don't know whether I've had 3 bad pairs of 6L6s in that amp, or whether 3 pairs of 6L6s in that amp have slowly revealed an existing problem in that amp, in that over time, a hum begins to creep in. The common mode cancellation goes away and begins to hum. And sometimes with some tubes, this pair of, well, I can't pick them up without others falling off the bench. So I need to put that up on the bench and do a long-term test. I did about 3 hours yesterday, and the hum had not come back at all. And I was checking the grid voltage on each output, and the bias was staying stable, and the grid voltage was staying stable. So I don't know whether there is a fault in the amp still. And I've checked on the scope. There's no high frequency oscillation that, beyond the range of hearing or anything. I think I just have got 3 suspect pairs of 6L6s in a row, which is maddening, because the amp sounds great. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? So I'm afraid that I've turned off the 58 Bassman, And if I play again on here, you're gonna have to put up with this 64 super reverb. Mic volume is a tad low. It really isn't. I promise you that. I will say that I've had issues with my internet provider the past month, and they are supposed to be coming out today at 5 o'clock to change the line to the house. So if we lose the stream today due to the internet going out, I will reboot the router and we'll be back up in about 10 minutes. So just let me know if there's a problem on that. Let's see. Richard Clark asks, he's really liking the lower gain sounds of the new 20-watt Morse Engel. Hold a second. Hear that? I don't know if you hear that. Did you hear that? It's like there's a staticky sound that came and went. Might be a preamp tube and the super reverb. Damn it. There it is. That kind of thing drives me nuts. I'm going to go put that in standby too. Is it you guys are saying my volume is low? I'm fine on as far as the level here. I mean, I have to trust my meters at some point. I've got this thing set up so that it peaks at negative 0.5 dB and averages about -3. So, that's pretty strong. Yeah, the static is weird. What might have been happening is that as that static came in, the the R10 began to hear that, and it began to trigger the gate on my vocal a little bit. When I check the playback, I'll check that. Let me put this damn thing in standby. As soon as I touched the chassis, that noise went away. So, old tubes, man. I don't have any experience with. I turned the volume off instead of standby, and then it came back. So let me actually turn the damn thing off. The whole thing of having the amp mic gate the vocal mic works fine as long as the amp doesn't start going in the background. All right. So, Richard, I don't have any experience with Ingles. I have a lot of friends who are techs in Europe who do not think highly of them, but that is not my direct experience. So, I would do some more research on them myself. I probably wouldn't. I can't say what I would buy because I have the ability to say I don't like any of those things. I'll just roll my own. J&S Pendleton. I do not have any opinion on quilters, build quality or otherwise. No one has brought any in for repair. I don't know whether it's because everyone's using them and they're not failing, or if just no one in this part of town is really, in this area is really using them. So I've never really been interested in them myself. Hey, Surge 98. You can use electrolytics that have been sitting a year. And, 5 years, probably not. 10 years, no. You know, if they're sitting 5 years, I'd form them back up before using them, just to be sure. But a year, that's fine. Hey, Brett. Yeah, on the basement video, I recommended the Weber 10-inch, but he noticed I've never recommended that for Princeton Reverb. Well, I don't think the Princeton Reverb sounds good with an Alnico 10. A single Alnico 10 is usually a pretty anemic sounding thing, but a four of them together, like in a basement, it's a very different thing. So 4 Weber 10A 125s is an entirely fantastic setup for an old basement, and not too bad for a super reverb, though. It's not as good as the old CTS with the larger voice coils. But in a Princeton, I prefer a ceramic speaker with some heft to it. So I like the G10C from Warehouse much better than any Alnico. Though the little Alnico Gold 10-inch is quite nice in a Princeton. Hey, Clyde. If I were to get a lucrative non-amp repair job, buy one amp for everything, or buy a few, or descend into bit madness building your own. I'm not quite sure what the question is. Would I buy one amp for everything? Would I buy a few, or I personally would probably descend into madness building my own. I would recommend to others buy a few. For some players, one amp will do everything. It's got a 72 deluxe reverb right here. For an awful lot of players, that amp will do everything they ever need it to do. But these guitars can sound very similar to each other. Believe it or not, this and this there's a lot of overlap in the sound. There's more overlap in the sound between these two guitars than there is between this SG and my 335. Believe it or not. So in theory, I only need one of those, right? But the differences are everything. And you can find new songs in the differences. Same thing goes for amps. Thank you, Curtis Everett. Hey, Jeff Motter. The Mojotone Blackface kits are good. I would not build one using all their parts exactly myself. Pardon me, but that's... I'm coming from a position where I wouldn't build a kit. I would just order the things I wanted anyway. But I would recommend the Mojotone Princeton kit to anyone who wanted to build a kit. I think it'd be fine. Hey, Barov, he's got a Tone King Imperial Mark II combo that rattles at high volumes. It seems that when he sits softly on it, it goes away. It could be a problem with the cabinet screw being loose inside. Could be a problem with the chassis not being secured, or just a panel that doesn't have enough pressure on it until you sit on it. So unless you want to do the Potsy solution, open it up and see if you can find something loose and rattling around. See if you can find where it is. Sometimes, like on that Bassman, the rear panel will vibrate against the rear of the chassis just because the panel's got a little bit of a warp to it. Doesn't want to flush up the entire way. So I'll go to the hardware store and buy that really, really thin insulation that they sell for windows, and just put that on there, and it compresses and fills that gap and keeps any vibrations from happening. There are a lot of tricks, but if it's a relevant new Tone King, contact, if you can, bring it to the dealer you bought it from and have them go through it for you. It's got to be pretty simple. Hey, Curtis. Yeah, the Club series from Crates were pretty good. The Club 20, if it's the one I'm thinking of, A good amp, really hard to open up because you got to do everything kind of like upside down through the back to reach things. It's really complicated to change tubes, but it sounds really good. Some of those crates from that period were real sleepers. Hey, Joseph, please discuss the changes I'd recommend to the AC15CC one to make it sound closer to JMI era amps. Anything to make the reverbs not sound awful? Well, I'm not a big fan of this AC15CC. I like the AC15C, and Vox has very confusing naming on that. But a custom classic, the 30 is pretty good. The 15 is not. On the custom series, both the 30 and the 15 are good. On this AC30CC, it's got a plate-driven tone stack. I would put a 500 picofarad cap to ground across the 56. Across the from the plate to ground. Just add a 500 picofarad cap there on the. Actually, don't do it that way. Do it a shunt across that 100K plate resistor. It's got a 100K plate resistor driving the tone stack. Put a 500 picofarad cap across that. I'm seeing it in my head. It's on the plate resistor. Make sure it's 220K for the first gain stage. I think it's 100K in the stock amp. And then the biggest thing you can do to the AC15CC is instead of having a 250K pot for the cut circuit, they have a 220K resistor, and that's like having a Vox cut circuit that's always on the brightest setting. Either change that out, or put another resistor in parallel with it. You really want that to be about 47K to 68K, typically, instead of 220K, and that'll roll off some of the ultra painful nails on the chalkboard highs without losing the nice high end, because no one plays an AC30 top boost channel with the cut all the way up. I mean, you always want to have that turned so that some of the ultra highs are down. Otherwise, it's just Chewbacca in Cloud City. Beyond that, at that point, make sure it's got 100. It's got 1K screen grids, and just don't use the reverb because the reverb sounds awful. Hey, Bottom Kitchen, what is the difference between the AA circuit and the AB circuit on Fender amps? Does it have something to do with push-pull? No, it's the AA was the first version, and it came out in early '63, and the AB came out later in '63. There were very few of the AAs made. The main differences were a little bit less filtering. Some of the first AA amps used less filtering than the ABs. A couple of changes here and there in the phase inverter, but nothing huge, like 33K instead of 22K on the tail and stuff like that. There's only about 4 parts that are different, typically between the AA and the AB, and most of the ones out there that have the AA tube chart are already AB or mostly AB inside. They just used up the full run of AA tube charts, even though they didn't make too many actual amps that were AA. We're going to take a break a little bit early because I've got to go blow my nose, and I don't want to do that to you guys or make horrible sounds in the meantime. So we're going to go to do an intermission right now. So I'm still coming up from underwater, and I love doing these chats, but I also don't want to be making gross sounds. I'll leave that to my buddy Six. See you guys in 7 minutes. Let's see. Let's do this thing I'm supposed to do. Coming back a little bit early from the break, I sorted out some of the stuff that needed sorting out. It's because I love you that I do this off camera. Lawn mowing and sinuses, fun stuff. Quick note, I appreciate everyone who's here, because if you're in the chat, you're obviously a subscriber, and that means a lot to me. But the proportions of views to likes are just crazy, and increasingly YouTube monetizes all this stuff based on the number of likes and promotes the videos based on the numbers of likes. So if you guys could go back to my channel and look at the last couple of videos that you watched, and if you didn't like it, and if you do like it, please do give it a like. It really helps me out. I'm really trying not to hit you guys with ads. YouTube wants me to give you ads every 3 minutes, and on this live stream, like every 10 minutes, an ad block and a chunk of ads, and I don't do any of that, and I don't directly sell you anything. So if you could help a brother out, give me some likes. It doesn't cost you anything, and then I can shut up about it. But there's so much pressure to subject you guys to ads, and you would be surprised how many auto settings I've got to uncheck when I load videos so that you don't have ad, because I hate that myself. So it would be nice if I, because the videos increasingly take a long time to do. I'm trying to do a better job, but with great work doesn't always come great reward. And if I had more likes, I would get paid more without it coming out of your pocket directly. So that would be nice, I think, for me. Let's see. What is the effect of using mismatched power tubes? Is it terrible to do so? Well, Moosey, there's a range of mismatch. If things are perfectly matched, then it sounds great on paper. If one tube's drawing a little more than the other, you get a little mismatch. Sometimes there's a difference in the harmonic distortion, or there's a different response you may or may not like or prefer, or you may not even notice. The issue is just when the mismatch is enough that you aren't getting common mode cancellation, so you begin to hear hum. And I don't know whether it came through earlier in the stream, but when the tube started to draw enough different current on that 58 baseband that there was an audible hum all of a sudden, I turned it off, because that's when you can get to the point where one might start to cherry plate and damage can happen. So as long as you don't hear an increase in hum, a mismatch is fine. You can have things that are off by 10% and still not have noticeable hum, and you may prefer the sound. Too much can be made of matching tubes. As long as you like the sound and there's no hum, and neither tube is going to be operating in an unsafe condition as far as red plating, that's fine. Back in the day when you went down to the 5 and dime to buy a new pair of RCA 6L6 grape bottle tubes for $5, they weren't necessarily matched. But if they worked fine. In fact, there's big era Fender where they didn't have a bias level adjustment. They just had a bias balance. So you could take two tubes and make a balance between them, and off you go. And people will be surprised. Everyone's chasing 70% dissipation online. A lot of the old Fenders, probably in stock form, if you go back to 1966, your amp was about 47% idle dissipation, 45. It's a clean amp. I have worked on a Benson Riffs and Rhythm, but it was a long time ago, and I don't remember which model it was, and I don't remember anything about it other than the fact that I remember that it was really finicky to get it in and out of the cabinet without damaging any of the Tonex. It had some real kind of prettified Tonex and bead work that was really a close fit for the chassis, and it was a bit tricky for me to work without doing any cosmetic damage in that area. But it was something minor. It doesn't stick in my head what it was. I thought it was a good amp, but I don't remember which model it was. 1217 Productions, 65-ish RVT Falcon. Reverb works but shuts off occasionally. Bad switch. Could be a bad switch. It could be a bad solder joint. I'd have to have the amp in front of me. It's almost got to be something minor, though. Hey, Mark Spurgeon. Hope you're feeling better. Hope you're back as well. Sebastian is saying, would I mind putting my mic level up? I have to run my laptop full volume to hear me. Well, I'm looking at the levels here, and with the I'm speaking here with the same setting I always use for this, and then I'm watching the level going to the live stream, and it seems to be pretty strong. I can increase it. Tell me if this gets too loud for you guys. As I speak. Now should be way up towards peaking the live stream. I set these and they stay consistent. I think what might have happened earlier in the stream is that as the noise from each amp began to come up, the noise level, the gate was triggering. Let me turn that gate off just in case there's any issue with that. But this is the same level I always stream at, and I'm looking at the levels on my meters, and they're all consistent. And my live streams are usually louder than others. Yeah, too loud now. That's what I thought. So let me put it back to where I always have it, which is just straight 3 o'clock on the preamp gain here. This is almost always louder than any other stream I watch. And it's almost as loud as a commercial, which, I don't have hyper compression on this. If I were to do this after the fact and compress it, I could get this even louder. I could have this like a negative 13 LUFS, and you'd be like, wow, Sunday. But I think what was happening earlier is as the background noise in the amps was coming up a little bit, it was beginning to, if you're having problems, Sebastian, it's on your end. I'm sorry. Close and reopen your browser. I promise you, I'm giving you a very strong level here, and I'm right on the mic. It says my volume is lower than normal right now. Others are saying my voice went too loud when I turned it up. So I don't know what to tell you. I'm looking at the meters, and it is staying exactly right below the red. So can someone let me know right now how this level is right now? I'm a lot quieter when not speaking into the mic. Well, yeah, thanks for that, Jack in the Box. I did clip, when I turned it up, I'm sure it was clipping. When I turned it up from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock on the pre, I think there's this thing that YouTube has, especially if you have YouTube Premium, where it has automatic level adjustments, and you need to play around with your settings. Some of that stuff is not your friend. Sorry. I want everyone to be able to hear me, but I watch these back, and I typically have a louder, more clear voice than you get on that pedal show or Tim Pierce, et cetera, including the produced videos. So I don't know what to tell you if you don't hear it well enough. But I do think I had a gating issue when the amps started making background noises. And that's just so frustrating. I thought both those amps were done. The amps are done. The tubes are the last frontier. I don't think anything about the new Bad Cat amps, Mark, because I've not had one of the new ones in. I've heard that they have a new designer, and I hope that he's doing great work, but I have not seen the results of that good work. I'm not a fan of the old Bad Cats, the Mark Sampson era stuff. I know that's not a popular opinion, but I think the Sampson stuff, both at Matchless and in Bad Cat, was way overhyped, and those opinions were formed by the fact that he was taking out large ad subscriptions in Guitar Player and Guitar World back in the day. Therefore, they said very nice things and gave lots of little pic graphics to the reviews. Yeah, Tojo. The Mojotone Deluxe Reverb kits are good kits. So are pretty much all the Mojotone kits are good kits. I would have to have one with its instructions to see if I've seen some Mojotone kits which have some mistakes, and other Mojotone kits where they have corrected those mistakes, and I hope that they have corrected all of them. A year ago, I was talking to one of the guys at Mojotone about maybe coming on as a consultant or doing some videos in conjunction with them. I don't need to speak out of school, and I don't know whether that person is still with Mojotone or if someone else at Mojotone watched my videos and said, no, this guy's too negative or whatever. But it looked like that was going to be happening, and then it didn't, and I have been too busy to chase it down. But I think Mojotone makes really good products. I'm not a fan of all their products, but a lot of them I am, and I think their kits are fine. More than fine. They're good. They're good kits. Hey, Paul has got an old amp that's unshielded on one side. It's heavy-duty foil glued to the cabinet. It is heavy-duty foil glued to the cabinet. Okay, yeah. I will commonly get heavy-duty aluminum foil and some 3M spray adhesive and spray it on there and wait 5 minutes and then put it on the back of a cabinet and then trim it, and any excess cleans up with soap and water, and there you go. And you've got a nice shielded, inexpensive shielding. You just don't let it get torn. Yeah, heavy-duty aluminum foil works really well. Remember, there are two kinds of of interference. There's general RFI, and a very thin layer like heavy-duty aluminum foil works fine. And then there's magnetic fields, and no traditional shielding will do anything for magnetic fields. You've got to get into mu metal for that, which is very heavy, very expensive, and usually not worth chasing that particular rabbit. Hey, Jack in the Box, is the 57 Custom Champ any good? No. None of the Fender Custom Shop amps are worth a damn. None of the Tweed reissues, aside from the 59 Basement LTD, avoid all the Custom Shop Fender amps. They're junk, and the hand-wired 64 series, they're just a worse amp for a lot more money. Find a used 65 reissue. Find a used Basement reissue. Very good amps. Notice I say used. I think the prices new are crazy. For the price of a new Deluxe Reverb 65 reissue, you could spend $100 more and get a Sir Bella, which is almost infinitely better. But a used good condition 65 Deluxe Reverb, that's the way to go. That's a much more sane price. I have not heard much from the new Gilmour album, Jorge. I saw them doing a live rehearsal yesterday. I watched about 5 minutes of them playing Time, and I'm a big Gilmour fan. But and I say this with love, David, if you hear this, maybe it was just the rehearsal. His voice is not what it used to be. He knows this, but he was playing the solo at a time, and it was obviously time to punch the clock. That's the gig. You play that same thing since 1974, and it sounded like he was playing the same thing since 1974. It's not as frustrating to me as to watch Roger Waters still touring on the wall from 1978. It's like, my God, you did that thing 40 years ago, and you're still doing that one thing. And to an extent, Gilmour's doing Dark Side still. They never do the Nile song. They never do some of the more interesting stuff. I'd love for him to hear him just do a night of What Saw the Deal for 40 minutes. But instead, it's a lot of doom, 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 G down to E minor, and it gets You know, it worked fine for Wagner. Hey, Mr. Jeff. I know you're also a fan of Mr. Gilmore and Mr. Waters separately, but I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if anyone gets mad at me for that, you know, it's just the way. It's just the way some of those bands do. They just keep milking the same thing. You know, it's better than the Stones. The Stones haven't had a good album since what, 73? Let's see. Hey, Stephen Bryant, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Brian, rather, not Brian. I found a decent price on some Kimman pickups for my Strat. He's really enjoying them. You're very welcome for that. Any insight as to why there's no website access? I don't know. I know that Kimman's website has been frustrating to use for a long time. It used to be worse. I don't know whether Chris is doing it himself or whether it's his brother-in-law doing it or something, but his website is very frustrating. But his pickups are very, very fantastic. And as far as the noiseless pickups go, they're by far the best I've ever used. I have no thoughts on the Rev series, Mark Miller. I have not played or been inside any. I've heard good things about them from players, and I hope that they're fantastic, but I don't know that they are. I hope to find out at some point. Maurice Spencer, yeah, I would see Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets in a heartbeat. Absolutely. That seems really cool what they're doing. And I follow Guy Pratt, who's also playing with Gilmore, because if you have that gig, you're not going to turn down. You're not going to say, well, I'd love to make all that money, but I'm tired of playing at 80 beats per minute. But yeah, the Saucer Full of Secrets gig is much more interesting. I won't subject you to a picture of it, but I was walking through Seven Dials 2 weeks ago about this time, and there's a little blue plaque up there that said Sid Roger Barrett lived here between 66 and 67, and it's right there at Seven Dials where and it was really nice. It was nice walking there, and then on another day we were in. I wasn't seeking these things out, but we were walking to a museum over in Marylebone, and just happened to realize that we were on Montague Square. So I saw where Ringo had his flat, where later Hendrix lived and John lived, and it was kind of interesting seeing that area and thinking these people, this was their daily experience, and just enough away from the teenagers that they could have a quiet little life here, where all the neighbors were too posh to pretend not to know who they are. Anyway, I don't seek out such things. We did go to number 3 Savile Row to see where the Apple headquarters were, where they did the Get Back sessions and the rooftop concert, because we were right around the corner at Fortnum and Mason. So I ducked over to Savile Row to see that, but I did not go to Abbey Road to cross the street or anything like that. Let's see, Dragutin. He would want to increase headroom in an AB 763 style amp. Would it be a good idea to replace the coupling caps with lower values? No. If you want to increase headroom, you would want to increase B+, and I would not... I'm sorry, coupling caps, not filter caps. If you want to increase headroom, the coupling caps aren't the way to look at it. You want to look at the B+, the headroom, and there's only so much of a headroom increase you can do, without going to some of the, say, late 70s ultralinear things. If you have a deluxe reverb which has 10K and 10K, you can change that out to a 1K and a 4.7K like in a super reverb, and you're going to get a fairly noticeable increase in headroom by changing 2 resistors and leaving everything else the same. But there's also just what pickups are you using. where are you perceiving that you're losing headroom? Because a deluxe reverb will never sound like a high watt, and a twin. A 60s twin does not have the same headroom as, say, a 76 twin, because there are a lot of other changes happening in the circuit. I'd have to sit down with you and figure out what you're playing, but some of it could just be a matter of changing what pick you use will magically give you some headroom. Hey, Joe McGraw, I didn't go into Ronnie Scott's, but I did walk past Ronnie Scott's and took that picture because it was funny to me that I went all the way to London and there's Ronnie Scott's, and right on the outside of Ronnie Scott's. I guess you guys didn't see that. I'll see if I have that picture. Let's see here. Can I do that? Let's see. Let's see if I can do that. I'll do it a different way. Let me go to the regular stream, and I did put a picture up. That's right. I put a picture up when I said, "Hey, I'm back, but I'm sick." Yeah. Anyway, right in front of Ronnie Scott's was a big picture of Booker T. Jones, because Booker T. was playing there, and Booker T. is from here. He was the organist and band leader, one of the band leaders here at Stax, and he created all that great Stax stuff. 7 minutes from my house. We could walk from my house to Stax. And so I go to London just to find a bit of Memphis looking at me right there. But we didn't do any of the nighttime things because we were spending all day walking everywhere, 10 to 15 miles plus a day. So by about 8 o'clock, we were done. Haywood Jablomi, any Velvet Underground fans here? I'm a huge fan of White Light, White Heat, and Nico, and the live record that they did, live in '69. I don't know everything that they did. I don't like everything that they did, but the stuff that they did, I like a lot. And I'd play some Venus and Furs or something for you right now, but both these amps have just have created mystery noises, so those amps are off. If I had a pressing need, I have the HX Stomp right here. I could have it up and running in about 2 minutes. But as good as that is sounding, and I'm going to be playing around with the what's it called? Tonex as well. I see those as support roles to the real amps. That just what I got at the beginning, playing the REM and the Tom Petty with a telly straight in that 58 Bassman. There's a response to that I've never been able to get from a modeler. It's a compression thing and an overtone thing, and the modeling will get there eventually. But I don't think it's there yet. Hey Brooks, I have experience with old VHT, which were back when Stephen was running it, and those were great. And then current VHT, he sold it. Someone else is making them under that name. Those are not great. And the current Fryette stuff that Stephen's making today is very good. So the old VHT, when Stephen was running the show, great. The stuff that Stephen's doing now, fantastic. The stuff that says VHT that's being sold today, I would avoid. And depending on the terms of his contract when that sale went through, he'd probably tell you the same thing, or he'd change the subject. It's a tricky thing. It's got to be. I know some guys who've done this. It's got to be a tricky thing when your last name is no longer yours for a product like Egnator amps. Bruce sold that, and while they're using some of his designs, they were misusing some of his designs. I'll just say that. Thank you, Thomas A. Carlos. It's very kind of you. Appreciate that. And so it's got to be very difficult when you lose control of your name, even if you're paid for it. I don't think Fractal is that good yet, Scott Christ, but it's getting really close. It's getting really close. The Fractal stuff is certainly ahead of the Line 6 and the Tonex stuff, but not quite there yet. Maybe it's possible. I used to know Cliff a little bit. I talked to Cliff when he was getting together the AC30 stuff, and answered some questions about the behind the scenes stuff that amp does, and he was really cool to talk to. But and the Vox modeling and the fractal stuff sounds really damn good. But I don't think it's quite there yet across the board. A lot of people won't know the difference, but a lot of people have not spent as much time with the real deal. And I know that sounds real elitist and snobby, but there's a reason Cliff was calling to ask me about AC30s. I'm not trying to be a snob, and I'm not trying to name drop, but Cliff has put in a lot of hard work to make that thing as good as possible, and every year it gets better and better. He knows where it needs to get, and but I don't think it's a slam to say it's merely very, very good. It's not quite phenomenal on everything yet. So I don't think Cliff would be offended at all. And I don't know how much information I gave Cliff that he didn't already know. I might have just been confirming stuff for him. But it was a nice series of conversations about it. I have got questions, and I've got two different time streams. So I'm going to get to more stuff on the fractal and more stuff on London that was just asked. But let me get caught up on the questions before. What do I consider a tube amp bass circuit? What are a good one? Emilio, there's so many great ones. I'll tell you, I'm looking at a 66 Super Reverb next to a 58 Bassman. And for bass, that 68 Super Reverb is a much better amp than the Bassman or the AB165 Bassman that's in the other room. If you were to run the Super Reverb into a bass cab, you would sound more like what you'd expect bass to sound like today. But even with that 4x10 there, you could do Abbey Road through an awful lot of stuff that you would not recognize as being a bass amp. A twin reverb or a super reverb with the reverb off, that's essentially the same thing that the Alembic FX1 was just the normal channel from a Showman duplicated twice, and the Showman normal channel is the same pretty much as super reverb. One capacitor is different, or the twin reverb. The only difference between the Alembic stuff and the actual Fender stuff is the Alembic used 150 microfarad cathode bypass caps instead of 25, which is frankly stupid and insane, and you're not going to hear any appreciable difference with 150. But so the AB763 circuit is one of the world's best bass amps, speaker dependent. The B15 and the SVT are the other two. There's some others, but those are the three that I would say that those are the things. Those are the three, and if you can't get a good sound with one of those three, you may be playing the wrong instrument. Got a 55 Tremolux, Clyde says. Box is original, and Ken Fox built the guts from there. It sounds great, but never played another one to compare. Paid $2,400. Did I do okay? I cannot tell you. I don't know who Ken Fox is, and I don't know. I'd have to see the job he did. I would think $2,400 is a bit high for a Tremolux, given how low wattage and kind of one-trick pony it is. I like a Tremolux. It's going to depend on the. I think the 59 is better than 55. If it's a true 55, you're talking a very different phase inverter and possibly the old grid leak inputs, grid leak bias. Hey, if it sounds great to you, you did great. I think it might be a little high for what it is. I don't know. I don't care much about originality on the box, but probably 2,000 would be what I would expect it to be. So yeah, I think you probably did okay. Thank you, Gustavo. Appreciate that. Badger, 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 badger. Ken, or K Tucker. I don't know if you're Ken, but K Tucker. We don't need no stinking badgers. Okay. Thank you. Hey, Jeff. Enjoy packing for your tour. Jeff's about to go off on tour in the Czech Republic. So I hope you have a fantastic time and have some fantastic goulash, etc., etc. All right. Let's see. Hey, Taylor Mudd, I'd have to sit down with your amp and look at it. I think the GA20 RBT. If it's a transformer based reverb tank, then the same suspects you'd find in a Fender work. Some of the Gibson stuff was looking like pulling pages from Ampeg and using capacitive coupled reverb drivers, which are very different. But I can't tell you off the top of my head which tank you need. I'm sorry. Hey Milo, for a 6G2 clone, it depends on what your tastes are, whether you want Alnico or ceramic. That's like saying what flavor of ice cream should you get. You know, as long as it's not bubble gum, you're gonna be fine. You know, a 12A 125, like Dustin says, would be really good for that compressed sound. But at the same time, you might prefer to have like a G12H30 for more a little more aggressive response out of a ceramic. Play as many. You know, the nice thing is once you get the amp, you could play it into a whole bunch of different speakers and see what you like. But you know, you can't say that the 12A 125 is better than say a G12H30. It's just going to be different. You know, when we get to the G12H30, do you want the 55 hertz or the 75 hertz? Neither is better. They're just different. And one guy is going to like this one better than the other one. And even if it's the difference between home style vanilla and French vanilla, actually French vanilla is kind of usually pretty gross. But you know, I can tell you which speakers will fail, and sometimes I can tell you which speakers are going to be very bad choices. Beyond that, I can only say these are speakers that you should try, and those are definitely speakers you should try. The goats in the machine. Let's see. Hey, David Hudson. Philosophical question. I have a 62 Gibson GA19 RVT. I think it sounds very nice, but then I crack the case and look at the build and, oh my God, how can this be? Well, it sounds like you're describing a 1962 Gibson. They were built horribly, and some of them sound fantastic, and some of them don't. That's one of the troubles, is that when they were built so poorly, it's random as to whether you get a good one. Whereas Fender was very consistent at building them well, so almost every Fender from the same time period was a good amp. As a reason, Fender won the amp war compared to Gibson. But if you have a good sounding Gibson, that's great. Hope that none of the brown glue becomes conductive. Hope that none of the brown glue catches on fire. And when, not if, electrolytic caps need to be changed. Hope that yours is one of the ones that has all the caps on the same side of the board, because a lot of the stuff from that same era, some of the caps are on the back of the board, and it's really problematic to work on those things. And half the wire connections break in the process of pulling it all out, or it's glued to a block of wood and you can't get it out. Gibson amps from that period, 58 through 64, tend to be built extraordinarily poorly, but some of them just sound so damn good. So there's your philosophy. Hey Don, a few Fender blackface knobs won't stay put. Is there a trick to keep them tight on the pot shaft without stripping the set screws? Uh, I'm sure that there is, but short of taking them to a machine shop and having the old holes filled with epoxy and then retapped so that you have fresh plastic that's not shrunk and compressed, because the old plastic dries out. Uh, if this is something where you really need them to be tight, I'd say take the old knobs off, put them in a box, save them, and put on reproduction knobs for use, because you can tighten the hell out of a reproduction knob without it cracking. But these are the Bakelite knobs from Keith Williams' uh, GA40 clone, and they're about 15 years old, and half of them have cracks because the Bakelite plastic ages, and they just crack. So it's got all new knobs on the amp. If that wasn't a valuable vintage set of knobs or anything, but just put the old ones in a box, put some new ones on it to gig with, and think about other things. Hey, Gast, yeah, those nacho casters can be fantastic. Yeah, and just do a 68 Deluxe or 67, depending on which drip edge it is. Yeah, a good Telecaster into a good deluxe reverb played by the right player, that's an ungodly thing. I mean, I can even sound good with that, and let alone what a good player is. Like the video with the two bassmen the other day, and Joe was playing my 335. And that guitar doesn't do that for me. It's very depressing on the one hand, but it's also very inspirational knowing that if I were to actually get good, I could sound like that. The gear is not holding me back. Hey, David Johansson. Do I need all four inputs on a trainer YB-A1? Would it be possible to swap the inputs on a late 70s for post faders? All right, you could. I never recommend putting a master volume in an input jack hole, because then you're routing a very loud signal from the output part of the section, from the output of the circuit back towards the input, and you can get bleed and you get oscillation and weird unpredictable feedback things and noise issues. I like to keep the input stuff by the input and the output stuff by the output, and ne'er the twain shall meet. So I would never put a master volume in an input jack, particularly a post-phase inverter, which is literally within the negative feedback loop, not just a channel master. Whether you keep all four inputs or hardwire them internally jumpered is up to you. Given that it's a Trainer YBA1, I would not make any big changes. I would keep the inputs the way that they are, and if you want to add a master volume, I'd do it on the rear panel, and change out this stupid circuit breaker for an actual fuse holder. Trainers are really good amps, but they are very loud, and most trainers have linear taper volume pots, which make them almost unbearably loud. They go from nothing to gonna kill you. So changing those out for audio tapers can be very nice. Hey, Brad, hope you're feeling better too. We both got ill at the same time, but you were sick. How do I know if a voice coil is bad? Have a 10-inch that farts out but looks good. Well, Chris, there are tricks to it. It's hard to show without a speaker. You can very carefully press both sides of a speaker cone down at the same amount, and you can hear often a voice coil rubbing, or you can feel it kind of catch. But I am not a speaker expert beyond that. I've got a speaker expert whose shop is 3 blocks from here, so I just take them to him, and I'll do that much. I'll be like, yeah, I hear a scrunchie when I do that. It's not the cone, it's something down in the middle. You can hear it, scritch, 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 and I'll take it to him, and he'll be like, yep, it's fucked, and then he'll unfuck it, and then life is good. It makes me look good to my clients. What do I think of master volumes in the effects loop? Thinking of a JHS little black box, I think that it is a good way to use a 10K or 100K pot in a little box that's run in an effects loop. If you have a low impedance effects loop, a buffered effects loop like you do in, say, even the Lowly Hot Rod Deluxe, that makes perfect sense. You can make your own, or you can buy the little black box. JHS doesn't charge much for it, and just stick in the effects loop, and then you have a master volume in an amp that really, really needed one to begin with. And it's a stupid oversight that they didn't put one in there because it's such a loud amp. There's no downside to it. It's fine. There are better master volumes, but that one works more than adequately for a hot rod or similar, and it will not be the weakest tonal point in that amp. Brendan, I cannot tell you how to dial in your DSL using pedals or EQ settings. The DSL 40CR is a better amp than the Blues King Supro, but they're very different circuits. So, it's a better version of a very different amp. So I'm not sure if you can make the Marshall sound like the Supro, but probably I'd roughly say you're probably one used Boss Blues driver away from happiness. Hey, Martin, I only have experience with the old customs from the 70s, as in the Danny Partridge backline. And they were interesting copies of Fenders with lots of ugly padding. It was the ugliest thing ever, and that plastic that they use for the cushy padding tends to degrade over time. So I'm not a big fan of the customs that I had in, and I will not be taking any more in unless Danny Partridge wants to pay me 1972 network star prices to fix it. I think some things just need to be retired. And yeah, no Creedence used one, but if he were recording today and I said, you want to use this custom or you want to use that 58 bassman, he'd use that 58 bassman if I ever get the speaker issue worked out. Best tubes for 59 bassman reissue. Looking at earlier breakup at lower volume. What's involved in replacing solid state? All right, well, Ramalama Ding Dong, you can look at the videos I've just put up on 59 bassman reissue. If you want earlier breakup at lower volume, use a 12X7 versus a 12AY7 V1. And I'm not using a solid state rectifier in there, and I address the B plus changes as a result. I'm using a 5U4GB to get a voltage drop, so the B plus is down closer to where it would be in an actual 59. But the main thing is that the bassman is a loud amp. At the beginning of the stream, I was playing in with the volume at 3. And below 3, the sound was meh. At 3, it came alive, but at 3, it was almost too loud for this room. So that's a good candidate for a master volume. Tojo, I don't mean to be rude, but I don't have time today in the stream to talk about what I would do differently from a kit, but you can get a very good result just building the straight kit. So start there, and then as you get your own experience level, you'll know what you want to change. Put it this way. When you know something because you've arrived at that yourself, then you know it. You know this thing, and you understand all the aspects that led you to this thing. If I tell you XYZ and you remember that I said XYZ, then all you know is that Lyle said XYZ. You won't necessarily know the whys or remember the whys, and you may not agree with my XYZ. You need to find your own XYZ. You need to come up with your own. So start by building it exactly the way Leo did with the parts that Mojo Tone supplies, and in time you'll if you keep doing it, you'll be like, okay, well, that's what I did on those first amps, and I was happy with what I did, but knowing what I know now, I'll go back and change X, Y, Z. But then that's because you know X, Y, Z, not because some guy on the internet told you X, Y, Z. Hope that makes sense. Clyde, I've been inside a few Two Rocks. They didn't have anything major wrong with them. They're built well. I don't remember that much about them other than, one had a bad resistor and one of them had a bad tube, some, real minor stuff. They're really well built amps. Hey, a couple of questions have been asked repeatedly. I mean this nicely. Please only ask a question once. I will get to it. I try to answer them pretty much in the order that they're asked, but when they appear multiple times, it makes me think that I've jumped ahead or behind in the chat because I'm seeing the same thing twice. It's hard to keep up with things. Hey, Robbie F. Yeah, I've been back about 2 weeks now, almost. We got back Monday before last, but I spent the last almost 2 weeks sick, and the first 5 days I spent passed out on the couch. So I'm just now getting back to the actual work. Hey, Chris R. Yeah, I'm borrowing with an eye towards purchasing the Tonex and the Tonex capture thing, and I'm going to do some captures of amps here. Now, ethically, I cannot sell them because I would be building the captures based on amplifiers I do not own. I will, pardon me, if I find that I enjoy using those captures, I can use them for myself. And I could tell the owners, hey, I made a capture of your amp. If you have this thing, I can send you the capture I made of your amp with these mics. And I'd be glad to do that as part of what I'm doing. I mean, not on everything. I'm not going to do that on, say, a Princeton reverb reissue that comes in for a new tube. But if I'm restoring a 64 Super Reverb and it's all working, and the day that I say, all right, I'll sign off on it, that tube noise has gone, all that stuff is ironed out. This amp is now sounding as good as it possibly can. Hey, I did these 5 captures of your amp because that way I can say, hey, I'm now playing a capture of a particularly nice sounding 64 Super Reverb, and I can give those to the owner. If the owner wanted to sell them, that's the owner's business. But I would not claim any of the IP or the right to sell a capture of someone else's amp. But I think it'd be a good thing for me to say, I did this work on this amp, I made a capture, and now when I sit down to play a Super Reverb sound, I know that it is a capture of a real good example of a real 64 that I captured with the Royer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I won't be doing it as a side hustle. And I won't be giving them away. I won't be selling them. I give them away to the owner, and I keep them for myself. Let's see. Thank you, Way Cool Jr. Boy, I haven't heard that song in forever. Was that right? There was an old Rat song, Way Cool Jr. Am I remembering that correctly? Wow, but thank you very much, sir. Hey, Jimmy Mac. Thanks for hurrying back. Do I have a preference for how to wire AC heater wires? Twisted, straight, shaped like a heart, symbolize love of guitar. I will often tightly twist them because it's nice to keep them together mechanically. It helps them stay where I want them to be. And there are places in the amp where that twisting does help because you're canceling out common mode stuff because of the way magnetic fields work. Primarily, it just sidesteps some whataboutisms in the comments. If I'm doing a typical Fender, I'll do it through the entire amp because that's the way Fender did it. But I know that I could do straight wire connections from power tube to power tube, and then a straight wire connection from the power tube to the phase inverter, and not have any issues at all with hum, because that's all common mode cancellation. The phase inverter and the output section works kind of like a humbucker. And I know that if I did that, I would know that. Brad would know that. Mike Soldano would know that. Everyone else would say, hey, he doesn't twist his heater wires. He doesn't know what he's doing. And then I have to spend all my time explaining that, no, actually, I do this for a living. Please, everyone shut the fuck up. So there are amps where I will not, because for whatever reasons I won't do that. But by and large, I just chuck it in a drill and get a nice, long, tight, twisted thing. Then I cut off the sections that I need, and it at least holds it together and stays where I put it. And you can see that in the replaced heater wiring I did on Keith Williams' GA40. Let's see. Way Cool Junior's got a question about the new Black Star MK3 stage answer, whatever they're called. I don't have any familiarity with the new Black Stars. I have not been a big fan of the previous Black Stars, HT Club 40 series, etc. But I don't know whether the new Mark III stage is the same, so I cannot speculate. As far as the EVH Iconic, that is the Iconic is a less expensive version of the standard EVH, which 5150, which is an absolute pile of shit. So if they've found a way to make that pile of shit for even less money, I would expect less and less. But I've not had the Iconic yet. I've only had the very expensive version of the pile of shit. And I would not wish that on my worst enemy to buy. So I hope that miraculously they found a way to make the cheaper version better. But I would not expect that to be the case. I think the EVH amps are kind of terrible in every way. Yeah, I pay for premium myself. I can't expect everyone out there to have it. I just don't want people to be hit with tons of ads when they try to watch my videos. Yeah, I mean, it's an easy. I twist all my AC secondaries. You've seen that, Brad. It keeps everything neat and bundled, and I can dress things easily. Even when it's just because I know that it's best practice, even if there's no direct benefit in the application. But there are times when I'll do a Soldano heater setup. There are times when I'll run heater wires separated from each other because it has to be for some other reason. How hard is it to bias an amp? It depends on the amp. Most amps are pretty easy to bias if you know what you're doing, but a lot of guys don't know what they're doing. And I say easy, but the way I do it is a dangerous method where I'm dealing with live voltages. So for most owners, I'd say get an external bias probe that goes between the tube and the socket, in which case it becomes very easy. It's not particularly accurate, but it's accurate enough for most musicians. And it's safe and fairly simple. But biasing is easy. Knowing what the numbers mean that's the trick. And having spent the time experimenting with it, like everyone says you should do 70%. Well, what does that sound like? What does 30% sound like? What does 40% sound like? What does 80% sound like? Okay, well, I'm looking at it on the scope. And if it turns out that at 58% idle dissipation, I no longer have crossover distortion. Is 58% idle dissipation the answer? Wait, that was at 1K. If I change it to 400 hertz, then I have crossover distortion, and that only goes away if I change the bias again. So do I bias until I don't see crossover distortion? Do I not? There's so much you've got to learn about this. So it's real easy. It's like NASCAR. You drive left really fast, and then eventually you stop, and you try not to hit too many things in the middle. That's all it is, right? It's a little bit more less complicated than NASCAR, but you're also asking a guy who does it 10 times a day, all day long, almost every day. So I may not be the right person to ask if it's easy. It's easy compared to a lot of other things I do. And Robbie F wants to know, keeps hearing that a 16 ohm cab with an 8 ohm amp is okay. Doesn't this add stress to the output transformer? Unless you've got a really bad transformer, it's fine. You can mismatch. You can run a 16 ohm cab with an 8 ohm tap. You can run an 8 ohm tap with a 4 ohm cab. You can run an 8 ohm with an 8 ohm. What you don't want to do is run a 4 ohm tap into a 16 ohm cab. You don't want to do a mismatch by two. A mismatch by one factor in either direction typically is fine. It won't sound as good to the primary the impedance of the output transformer being a mismatch at certain combinations, but it'll be safe. And especially like in the old Fenders where it has two jacks and it says 8 ohms, and that if someone plugs in two cabs, they're going to have 4 ohms. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. Same for if you plug into a 16 ohm cab into a deluxe reverb. It'll be just fine. Just won't be quite the same sound as if you're plugging into two cabs and still magically had an 8 ohm load there. All right, now we're to the volume arguments. For some reason, when you aren't talking, we don't hear anything. Yeah, that's the real fun part. Hey, Gary Bertolo, I don't know why you needed to resubscribe, but I'm glad you're back. I have never worked on a bootlegger clone model of a Dumble. Sorry. Can I recommend a reasonably priced channel switching combo with separate tone controls for each channel? Well, yeah, but that's not the criteria that I would need to recommend an app to you. I would need to know what you want the channels to do, what kinds of music you're playing. And I'm not a huge fan of channel switching combos myself, but I would need to know, are you doing this for like a top 40 thing? Or is this so you can get two very specific sound? I mean, are you trying to get a bunch of generic usable sounds or very specific things? Are you a country player, a jazz player, a top 40 player? I need more information before I can make any kind of recommendation to you. I'm sorry. Keith Elmo, that's also really a broad question. Best application for Princeton. A really good player, and that can be in any genre. With Princeton's, I really like the G10C from Warehouse, and there's a Jupiter version of that same speaker that's also really nice. But if someone else out there is going to be preferring a Celestion 10-inch gold speaker with that thing. It's speaker preference is very personal and very subjective, and not everyone can be right, just me. And on that note, we're going to take another 7-minute intermission. Everyone stretch your legs or whatever else is in need of stretching, and we'll see you back in 7 minutes. Let's see. I need to turn that off. Oh, this just arrived. It's a dual gang 1 meg volume pot and a little 10K trimmer, so I can finish up that amp for Keith Williams. Might do that this afternoon if I can stay awake long enough. Yeah, the illness thing. I don't know what it is. It's not COVID, according to the tests, and it didn't quite feel like a cold or a flu or hay fever or anything, but I was just zapped. Let's see, where were we? I have a Bassman clone head that when plugged in the bass channel, I still get sound from my guitar with the volumes all the way down. Any clue where to start? Van Schenk Guitarist asks. Yeah. First of all, make sure you don't have Russian preamp tubes. That's really common with Electro-Harmonix and Tungsol and Sovtek and other Russian tubes where there's just going to be bleed. Change them up for some JJs or some Chinese tubes and see if that bleed goes away. That's the most common cause and the easiest solution. It depends on, it's like a little bit like pneumonia and chest and head cold, just little levels of each, Brad, and brain cloud, just exhaustion. Those are the easiest things to do, Van Schenk guitars, and since they are such a common cause, I would try that first. That said, unless it's a good bit of bleed, everything's still going to sound okay. But sometimes the bleed's enough that you're like, I'm getting interaction between the channels that's negatively affecting each channel, and that's tricky. Dulcet tones. I don't mean to have dulcet tones. I want to have svelte tones, but yeah, ain't nothing svelte about me. Yeah, I am a little under the weather. The weather's a little over me, or one of those things. Let's see. Beso profundo, gooden. Yeah, I'm trying not to do the late night jog too much, but when I get tired, when I first wake up in the morning, or when I'm tired, I go down here. I spend a lot of my time in the videos when I'm doing narration for you guys speaking up here, which is the register I've learned to use for the telephone because you can actually hear what the hell I'm saying when I speak in this register. But I get tired of speaking up here, and when I relax, everything comes way, way down. And this is when I'm reading a book. This is the narrator in my head right here. This is the voice I live with. And then I speak up here when I need to be audible and have everyone know what I'm saying, but it is an effort, and it tires me out. It was always fun trying to be a singer on stage. The world is full of goddamn tenors. I want to snap their twiggy little necks. Not a lot of love out there for us baritones in pop music. Vinicius says the DRRI, the Deluxe Reverb reissue, came back from the tech with the ET65. Very different from the Jensen. Might say less scooped, less Fendery. I don't think it's less Fendery. I think it's you just hear different aspects of the amp. It is definitely less scooped without being mid-range forward like a. It's not a nasal thing like a greenback, but it is full. You have very full lows, very full mids, and very present highs without being strident. And as scooped as is the tone stack in most Fenders, whether you're aware of it or not, there's a big notch in the frequency response of Fenders. I find that the ET65 or the Creamback 65 or the older M65s from Celestion just it just fills in that notch without it being gone. The notch is still there, but it's not as scooped. It's a beautiful sound. The way I tell clients generally is if your ideal Fender sound is Robin Ford, then the ET65 or the Creamback 65 will do that thing. If your ideal Fender sound is, say, Stevie Ray on Riviera Paradise or Lenny, that's a more scooped sound, in which case the G12C which is the variant on the old Jensen C12N, that epitomizes that. And it's nice to have more than one cab, in which case you can have all these different choices, and you can have one amp with radically different sounds depending on which cabs you're running into. But if I were to choose one speaker, which is pretty much what I have done for the shop, 90% of the time when you hear my black 2x12, that cab has got an ET65 and a Veteran 30, and that combination sounds fantastic in the room, but I stick the mic typically on the ET65. And so you guys have heard an awful lot of very nice amps going through that speaker. And if an amplifier doesn't sound good with that speaker, there's something wrong with that amplifier. It's not like trying to get a sound out of a twin into a GT75. You know, pain. Make it stop. Let's see. Thanks, Count Domingo the 7th. We had a fantastic trip. It was wonderful. No question other than what's on the wrist. I'm wearing my cheap little $80 Speedmaster clone, the Pagani. I like the way it looks. I like the way it feels. I don't have to think about it. It's quartz. It's always on time, and it looks fantastic. You have to be within a foot to tell that it is not a $10,000 Speedmaster. But I don't have to worry about walking around with a car on my wrist. Yeah, I've heard of Monty's Tojo. I have no direct experience with their pickups or their fretboard stain stuff. I've seen various people in the UK use them and seem to be happy with them. And I know that Mick from the Pedal Show likes their stuff. And I'm sure at this point he could use an awful lot of things. So if he's happy with them, they got to be doing something right. But I have not tried them myself. I did not go to Liverpool. Liverpool is quite a ways away from London. We did 6 days in London and 2 days in Oxford. I would love at that point to have rented a car and just gone everywhere. I would have gone straight through to Bath and Cornwall, and then up through Wales. And then I wouldn't have fussed with Liverpool. Nothing against Liverpool, but I'm not chasing the Beatles. And then I would have headed up to Edinburgh and maybe Glasgow. I would love to see Cornwall and Wales and Scotland, but I would like to do that with a lot more time and a car as opposed to just taking the train, as lovely as the trains are. Hey, D. Yamariv. He's building a 100-watt JMP clone, going to have a 3-way bright cap switch. Which values would I recommend? As I use as options, 120, 1,000, and 5,000. Thank you very much. Love the channel. Thank you. I would not drill for the switch yet. You may find that you never want to have that switch. You may find that you always want one thing. The difference between those three is huge. I would say you need to try 120 or 100, 250, and 500 and see what you think of those first. Live with those, and then 500 to 1,000 to 2,000 before you go all the way up to 5,000. 5,000, unless you're always using that volume at about 2 o'clock or higher, anything below 2 o'clock, it will be piercing and bright and hissy with a 5,000. I'm not sure that you would find any real use for a 3-way switch. If you've already drilled it, great, but hold off on drilling it until you can play around with it, because it's such an easy thing to do without any voltage present there on a bright cap. It's important to it's so important to play around with that yourself. The level's much higher in a previous live stream. That's very odd because I'm looking at the levels here, and they should be exactly the same. Now, I did have my previous live streams compressed quite a bit more than this, and I found that at times it sounded a little unpleasant. I'll listen back to this and see if I need to make any adjustments in the future. But according to the levels I'm looking at right here, I'm pretty strong. We shall see. Yeah, Tonex and all the modeling stuff can be a little bit tricky live, as you know, Dustin. Hey, Joe. Yeah, the Sun Record's still open to tour. Yeah, Sun Studios is still open for a tour. They do great tours. I know a lot of the guys who work there, and I know that a lot of that equipment is very good because I've rebuilt a lot of the equipment in that studio. If you were to go there and do a session, they have a 56 and a 57 deluxe that I've put my magic through, and they've got a really nice B15 that I've done work on. And basically, I've rebuilt about 10 of their amplifiers and done a lot of the preamp stuff in the recording room itself. So if you needed to go track a record at Sun, the gear is approved by me. Perhaps I should do a walking tour of Memphis sometime. Well, a walking tour of Memphis would take forever. It's not a walking city. Pub crawl, showing a variety of nightlife and bands. Well, I don't go out and do nightlife and bands anymore. I thought about doing a travel thing for people coming to Memphis without any of the touristy crap, because I've watched so many travel videos in preparation for my own trips, and I know the ones which are terrible and the ones which are good. Memphis is a tough city if you don't want everything that you do to be sponsored by Bud Light. There's some really good stuff here, and there's some really terrible stuff, and most tourists just do the worst of what the options are. I have never been, nor will I ever go willingly to Graceland. Take any redneck and give them all the money in the world. In 1971, they're going to build Graceland. Ugh. Did I go to any pubs in England? I went to a lot of pubs in England. I tried to go to as many as I responsibly could, and I was doing my own tour of cask ales. And from the week's research I was able to do, my two favorites that I tried were London Pride and Doom Bar. Doom Bar is apparently Welsh, and you'll never guess where London Pride is made. Both of which were really good. There were a lot of hoppier things I did not care for, but I liked those two cask ales a tremendous amount. And I had a Spanish lager whose name escapes me, but I've got a photo of it. And I was in a pub in West Oxford, sitting on the side of the outdoors by the side of a river. It was a lovely day, talking to the locals and playing with their dogs. And I had a lager and lime. And it was just refreshing and perfect on that sunny day. And it was, I ordered a lager and lime because that's what Ringo ordered for the Beatles in Help. 2 lagers and lime and 2 lagers and lime. So I tried that, and it was a wonderful thing for the afternoon. But mostly I just had cask ales. And my wife had many half pints of Guinness, and having been told how good Guinness is over there compared to here, I tried it, and it tasted just like Guinness always tastes, kind of like stale bread. I don't get the Guinness thing. But yes, and I am steak and ale pied out, and I don't want to slag the British cuisine too much, but I was very whelmed with most of the British food, but the Pakistani and Italian and actual Chinese, real Chinese, and the Punjabi food that we had was just fantastic. Hey, JJ Collins, I don't use an ISO transformer very often. I've got my Variac configured that I can have it grounded or not. So it can operate as an isolation transformer when I need it to, but it can also be grounded when I need it to, so I make that decision based on the application. But I'm never just defaulting to an isolation transformer. If I were working on a bunch of solid state stuff like Crown Macrotechs where that was really critical, I'd be doing that kind of thing more often. As I've got for the current limiter, I've got a 150 watt bulb and I've got a 300 watt bulb, and I change them out depending on what I'm measuring. Cornwall, that's right, Doombar. It's not Wales, Cornwall. Thank you, Martin. Yeah, and lager and lime. Yeah, but yeah, I quite enjoyed the lager and lime. I really liked the Doombar, but I think my favorite out of the trip was London Pride. Now the thing is, at each pub, I would typically only have two. One night I had 3 pints, so I was only there 5 or 6 nights, and then I had a few during the day. So I would typically have 2 to 4 pints a day spaced out, and I did not get a chance to try everything because a lot of the places are Nicholson's pubs, so all the selection was very similar. And much like here, there's a disease where the IPA disease has hit there. So over half the beers and ales that were offered were undrinkable IPA nonsense, which left me with a relatively small selection from which to try. So I certainly have not tried everything that's there. I can report that there's one called Landlord, which tasted like grapefruit peel, and I was very unhappy with Landlord. But since I ordered it and I wasn't going to be a whiner, I did drink it. That was at the Grapes, just down the street from Leadenhall. We tried to go into Leadenhall to get something to drink, but it was full of douchebag investment bankers. Every bar in Leadenhall was just full of people straight out of extras from Wall Street. So we went around the corner to the Grapes, and it was I misordered, but I finished it because I'm a grown up. And then we walked over to Whitechapel and had a fantastic Pakistani meal. Though being Pakistani, they did not offer any ales or beer there, but they did have a lovely Coca-Cola. Funny story about that. That was the first curry we had there, and I ordered it because it said it was hot and spicy. And it comes to the table, and it was just the blandest thing I'd ever had. And I called the waiter over, and I said, "Hey, it said hot and spicy on the menu. You meant hot and spicy for Brits, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's British hot and spicy." I said, "Can you take this back to the kitchen and doctor it up, make it like you were going to eat it, like you're going to serve it to your friends?" He said, "No problem." And he took it back and came back about 2 minutes later, and it was delicious. It was hot and spicy, and probably would have put a lot of the Brits in the hospital. But after that, whenever we went for a curry, I would ask the waiter, it says it's hot and spicy. Is it really, or is this British hot and spicy?" Because I said, "I'm from the American South, and bring it up. Bring it up like 8 notches. Make it like you're going to eat it yourself." And they did, and it was fantastic at that point. But my God, the British notion of what's hot and spicy, it's almost cute. And I know this with all love to my Britons here, my Brits, my English, my Irish, my Scots, my Welsh. I love you all, but the British concept of hot and spicy is not the Memphis version of hot and spicy. Hey, RJ Electric, does a 68 Custom Pro Reverb hold together better or worse than a Deluxe when you do the volume and treble on 10, bass at 0 setting? It's 68 Custom Pro Reverb is an interesting amp. It's not quite a real version of anything, but it's a good amp. But I've not done a comparison between the two, and I don't ever do the crank everything, turn the bass at 0. That's not a setting I like, so I've not done that comparison. Sorry. Hey, Dragutin. Yeah, you can. If you were to slightly decrease some coupling caps and decrease some cathode bypass cap values, You will lose some ultra lows, which will give you more amplification available for the other frequencies. But just figure out how to call up the high pass calculations to figure out the frequencies, and realize that negative 3 dB at 100 hertz is not like all the low end disappears. You can go up pretty high before you really notice that it's getting appreciably tight. Gas says, "Come on, Lyle, I'm from the mids. Come see me next time. We can have a fall in Birmingham if I like spice. Hey, if I can make it, I'll take you up on it." I have a suspicion, though. I have a suspicion that your idea of hot and spicy is still not my idea of hot and spicy. And I say that not because there's anything defective with you or England, but I like things hot and spicy compared to other people in the American South. I mean, it's very rare for anything to be too hot for me to enjoy. And I'm always kind of daring the people with the local Indian, who are also Pakistani, not Indian, to really spice things up for me here. Someone wants to download my brain. I'm just trying to reboot it. Ooh, some hot mustard sauce would be nice for rebooting and for clearing all this stuff up here. Yeah. I need to sweat with eating hot food. I need to cry. I don't want to cry. I don't want to have like snot, but I like it when all the pores open up, and I like the endorphin rush. I like it when it's so hot that as long as you keep eating, you're fine. If you stop, it builds up and gets unpleasant. So you just have to keep eating. And the Pakistani place was really good and had fantastic lamb chops, charcoal lamb chops. But the Punjabi place, man, they got it really nice and hot and spicy, and they had cheese naan. The combination of the cheese naan and then the really spicy stuff. My wife could not eat what I was eating. Man, I miss that. I'm going to start cooking more, learning how to make more curries myself, because there's two good places in town, one of which is close but very expensive. The other place is a really big drive and expensive, and the places which aren't expensive aren't worth going to. And I just need to learn how to cook it myself. I went to Pinsey Spices yesterday and bought some curry powders and garam masalas and goodnesses, and I'm going to start learning how to really do that myself. What is my best tube retailer today? I've had the best consistent luck with Tube Depot, but I've had no bad experience with the tube store either. It's just the tube store is in Canada. It takes a while to ship to me, and Tube Depot is 20 minutes away. I think we're going to be wrapping up the amp questions, because my brain is, I'm not at my best when it comes to amp questions today. So anyone who's asked a question, we'll have to do that another time. Let's just bullshit for a little bit before we run out of time. I'll make sure. Thank you, S. McDonald. That's very kind of you. So make sure I haven't missed out any super chats. If anyone asks a super chat, I'll answer that before I just start talking about the trip and stuff. Sorry, I'm just feeling really weird. I'm trying not to belch on everyone, and my head, the pressure inside my head keeps changing. London Pride is fuller, definitely fuller. I saw there's a great YouTube channel, Jules Guides. I even bought his book to support him because I've enjoyed his videos so much. And he's a guy, my generation, maybe 5 years older, and into the same music I was, just on the other side of the pond, and he does tours of London. And they did a tour of the Fuller Brewery, showing London Pride. They even sang the old Noel Coward London Pride song, which I'd subjected Nikki to when we were at the Lamb and Flag. I'm not sure if that's in Covent Garden or Seven Dials. I'm not sure where the dividing line is there, but nice old pub. Yeah. All right. So all right. That's enough amp stuff. Let's talk about my trip. You had an earthquake and an aftershock. Congratulations. Do you get a lot of that in South Australia, in Sydney area? Yeah, I want curry myself now. There was an interesting night. Remember before I went, everyone was like, "Hey, be careful going to England. There's going to be race riots and blah blah blah." And of course, we didn't have any of that, and everyone was very nice. And one of the nicest neighborhoods we walked through in terms of what it would be like to live there. We were walking through the East End, Whitechapel, which is all very Bangladeshi and Pakistani, and some African immigrants, and it was it felt like Bedford-Stuyvesant does now. Not 80s Bedford-Stuyvesant where you're going to get shot, but just like a little bit third worldy, but at the same time very comfortable, and everyone seemed to know each other and be greeting their neighbors, very much like a community. And it was really nice to spend time there. But when we were in Oxford, right across the street from our hotel was this pub, and I think it was the Friday night. We came back from dinner, and Nikki was tired. She went up to the hotel to crash, and I wasn't done yet, so I went across the street to this pub, and almost everyone inside the pub was about 15, 20 years older than I am, and I thought, looks like I might have walked into a pub full of former skinheads. It just gave me that vibe. And it was really kind of interesting. Most of them were pretty in their cups, and they're all watching the football. And there were some younger guys who were really tore up, borderline starting shit with each other, and it was just really interesting. I got a beer, and one guy called me over, and his name was John. He wanted to ask me about. He could tell he heard me speak. He knew I was American. He wanted to ask me questions about where I lived. So, where do you live? Memphis. Okay, the Elvis thing. We do the Elvis thing, and I said, well, everyone knows Elvis, but it's like, people come to London and they want to walk around trying to find the Beatles, and that's been gone forever. And there's so much more to Memphis, just as there's so much more to London than the Beatles. So if you come to Memphis, it's not just Elvis; it's Sam and Dave, and it's Otis Redding, and it's Al Green, and it's Big Star, and so much stuff. Just the same way, to me, I love the Beatles, but I don't chase that. And, I'm looking at how he's dressed and all that. I'm like, I would love to experience Camden like 78 through 80, because I love the Specials and Madness and the Selector and all the two-tone stuff, but I know that that's gone. And he said, yeah, that was his world. And so we talk about this, and it comes out, he's one of those guys who starts to drink and they start to confess. He was pretty much saying that he was a former skinhead who was on the wrong side of a lot of those riots in the late 70s, and that he has regretted that, and he has got friends who are black and friends who are Pakistani since, and it was a weird thing for him to be very confessional to a stranger, and I had already gotten that sense from the pub that it was a lot of former skins, former rough boys, and it was really interesting. The guy was so drunk; he was really hard to understand. Not a British accent thing. He was getting unintelligible. I eventually had to separate myself from that conversation. So, I'm like, who do you support? And he's like, Oxford United. So I raised a glass. Here's to Oxford United. We clinked, we drank. I walked off. He was happy because he got to confess. And then I said something nice about his football team. And I walked outside, and this happened twice in a row. I was outside having a cigarette, and newsflash, I have think sticks occasionally, having a beer outside, and twice, two young Pakistani kids. I assume they're Pakistani. They were Muslim. I say kids; they were in their early to mid 20s. Wanted to ask me about life in America, and they thought that it was. They had heard that how segregated America was, and how much we hate blacks, and how much we hate Muslims, and all this. And I said, there are parts of America that are like that, and there are a lot of people who profit from that. But if you were to be in my neighborhood, no one would care if you're Pakistani, or no one would care if you're Muslim. And certainly no one would say, oh, it's a Paki. That's not a word we use. And, I was talked about the Muslim friends I have in the States and what their life is like, and that it is not, that while there are areas specifically in the Northeast where it can be very difficult, most of America is pretty laid back, and while we still have our problems, it's not full-on segregation the way it used to be. And then the second kid who has asked me these questions, his drunk friend came up, and his drunk friend wanted you to know that he was a fucking Irishman, and he fucking loved this Paki, and that he was Irish and his friend was Paki, and he was Irish and his friend was Paki. One of those drunks who just goes on and on and on. And he'd ask a question, and you start to answer it, and he'd interrupt you to tell you how much this fucking Irish guy loves this fucking Paki. And his fucking Paki friend, which is looking at me and rolling his eyes because this Irish kid was just so drunk, and his entire identity was being the Irish kid. And I wanted to say, man, unless you're in Boston, no one in America gives a fuck that you're Irish or that you're Pakistani. We wouldn't say, oh, it's the Irish guy and the Pakistani guy. We'd say, oh, it's Hakeem and his drunk friend. Guest, he says, guest mate, no one says Paki. This Irish kid was Paki. And Irish. It was his brand identity. And he was just emphatic about it. It was so obnoxious. And Nikki had heard me speaking outside, so she came over from the hotel. She was here for this part. And it's one of those things where I'm like, man, this kid is either going to pass out or start a fight any moment now. He was just one of those kids, and it's stereotypical to say Irish, but we get him here all over the place. But what made me sad, because his friend, the young Pakistani guy, really was curious about life in America, what our houses were like, how I lived, going to the grocery store, what I really thought about Muslims, what I really thought about immigrants. And I kept trying to have a real conversation with him. Meanwhile, his friend kept telling me how much he loved his Paki. And it was really weird. But it was a very interesting evening. I have never been so much the outsider and like the Margaret Mead anthropologist taking notes. I had the skinhead confessions, and then people asked me about Elvis and Elvis and Elvis and Elvis. And then the two Muslim immigrant kids who were honestly curious about life in America. And then the Irish kid who was so caught up in being other that he just could not hear that in America being Irish is not really other anymore, unless there are places in Boston or mostly around Boston still, and some places in Chicago where you can choose to be Irish before anything else. But for the most part, we don't care. Too many. It used to be the case. No dogs, no black, no Irish. But it's just not a thing here. So it was interesting. But there was no animosity that we saw anywhere in London or in Oxford. And I know it's there. I didn't go to South Brixton. I didn't go up to northern. What's the neighborhood? Tottenham. I didn't go to Tottenham because I'm not going to take my wife to places like that. Places where you can expect to have problems. We avoid it. But we ran into a lot of diversity and a lot of we were definitely the minority the evening we were walking through Whitechapel. But it was a complete safe experience, and it was really nice seeing people recognize each other everywhere and greeting each other. And it's a very different thing for the primarily Muslim community there, where they don't drink. And it was getting towards dark, and everyone seemed completely sober, and it was very encouraging. And I really, on the heels of being warned so much not to go because it's going to be people being anti-immigrant and riots everywhere, we didn't see any of that, and all of that had ended over at Whitehall by the time we were there. That had ended about a week before. So the only danger to anyone around 10 Downing Street was being bit by one of the horses. Anyway, this is, hey, Gas, this is not me talking about the Irish. This is me talking about this one kid who was emphatically Irish and wanted you to know it. And, I wasn't sure if he wanted me to buy him a pint or fight him, but I've met too many kids like that here too. It's one of those things. Asshole's gonna asshole. But it's a shame that I didn't get to have the conversation with his Paki friend, because the people were very curious, and it's interesting how much we view each other as cartoon versions of each other. He had a sense of how Americans should be and how Americans should experience the world and view the world. And when we all have our blind spots about each other, and that's one of the reasons I love to travel. And I will ask the questions too. I want to know. It's just a little tough when you're trying to get the pulse of a country and you realize that everyone you're talking to is drunk. Anyway, on that note, I think we're going to wind down because I'm really tired and I'm going to go take a rest. And I appreciate you all joining me today. I hope this was interesting on some level to those of you way past when we stopped talking about amps. And I'm going to take that super chat off. Thank you, S. McDonald. I didn't mean to leave that up there for so long. I wasn't looking at myself, so I forgot that it was there. Let's see. I'm going to begin the sign-off stuff. And hopefully next time we get together, I won't be so tired, and I won't feel like my head is going boom, 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 boom. So have a good weekend, everyone. See you next time.